Asia is in the eye of the storm when it comes to climate change, with floods, heat waves, and worsening food security threatening the region's existence. But some countries are taking steps to avert the crisis, even turning it into a catalyst for change.
In China, there's a saying that goes, 无肉不欢, or no meat, no joy. China consumes more meat than any other country, in fact, about 30% of it. That works out to an estimated 53 million tons of pork and 10 million tons of beef and veal for this year alone. And this is feeding a growing problem.
Animal agriculture is said to contribute more to climate change than the entire transport sector. And according to UN data, that makes up about 14.5% of global emissions. Now, that's from clearing forests for pasture, making feed, as well as animal digestion and waste processing.
China wants to change what its people eat. It plans to halve meat consumption for both health and environmental reasons. As the world's largest carbon polluter, it's aiming to peak emissions by 2030 and be carbon neutral by 2060. One solution it's eyeing: meat substitutes made entirely out of plant products. I'm about to find out what's the attraction.
It looks like meat. And it tastes like meat too.
Yeah.
But on average, emissions from plant-based foods are 10 to 50 times less. To find out more, I head out to see Vince Lui, who co-founded 4-year-old plant-based meat startup Zhen Meat.
So Chinese, we have long history eating and creating mock meat dishes, but plant-based meat is relatively new, right? It's a new technology. We use extract from high-protein plant, for example, soy protein, and for example, we will use extract from rice to give it more nutrition, amino acid content. We create formulation that is high in protein, medium in fat, but low in saturated fat.
But what about the texture of the meat? That's quite important as well, right?
We call it extrusion technology. This product will form a fibrous texture,
Right.
like real meat, but there is no color and flavoring. So we add some, extract from plant. You can smell it. Yeah.
Let me try and guess what flavoring this
You
is.
cannot drink it, but you can smell it.
Okay, it's a clear liquid. Okay, this is kind of interesting. It smells like, I'm guessing, beef.
Yes, we have meatball and crispy pork tenderloin, and we will have even some catered Chinese cuisine product, for example, our meat cube, our meat strap that used in Chinese stir fry.
By catering for Chinese taste buds, Mr. Lui isn't worried about getting swallowed up by global players. That's especially with the projected growth of the country's vegan food market from $10 billion in 2018 to $12 billion next year.
But our true competition is not inside the circle, it's outside the circle. Our true competition is still animal meat product. But whether it's tasty enough or affordable enough will determine this consumer whether they will buy again and again.
But the price of plant-based meat makes it a tough sell. It can cost about $8 to produce a single kilogram. Mr. Lui says the goal is to halve the cost, so it's closer to the price of regular pork. This means scaling up and getting it onto more dining tables. Local craft beer brewery Greatly Brewing is, taking the lead. it started serving up plant-based versions of its popular meat dishes this year.
It's just as versatile as meat is, so we've been able to use it in all the dishes the exact same as meat.
Given the amount of meat that Chinese consume, is it going to be a true viable option for them?
I think if the quality is on point, I believe people will begin to experiment with other forms of meat, and especially as we learn more about the environment and how we can help.
So far, Great Leap says it has sold about 200 orders of its set menu, which includes plant-based meat. Those tucking into it include the health conscious.
女生爱美，会减肥，我肯定会选那个。我觉得它热量肯定会更低。
那男生？
如果我不是在特意的减脂的话，那我可能还是会选择这个牛肉，补充更多的蛋白质。
Despite promotions to get consumers to bite, it's likely to take time before plant-based meat becomes mainstream.
如果是服务员，他可能先要去介绍一下这个肉，他会问说，哎，为什么不是真的肉，假肉，还卖这么高？但其实不是，它也不能叫假肉，它其实是更有科技成分，或者是更有创造性的一种肉吧，它还没有普及到大众，所以你还是需要有一些 education 的。
Still, the industry has come a long way, with more than 50 startups now operating in China. Ryan Xue, who heads an industry group, expects China's appetite for meat alternatives to grow. That's especially after President Xi Jinping called for a greater food approach to nutrition in March. This involves shifting the focus away from just farmland to new areas like biotechnology to extract protein.
The three biggest questions about food security, environmental sustainability, and economic became one, where we can expecting more fundings from different levels of the government, and also quicker regulatory approval for like novel proteins, novel ingredients.
And that recognition could be significant for an even newer slice of the meat substitute sector. Lab-grown meat startup Joe's Future Food in Nanjing recently secured $11 million in funding to develop its first line of products.
动物养殖的时候是相对比较生态，就我们只需要少量的动物提供细胞，然后呢，这个其他的生产过程呢都是在工厂中，所以说呢，它也减少了包括食用不管是野生动物还是养殖的动物，以及呢就这种过程，就是动物饲养过程中这种病毒所造成的人畜共患病的这种转移会大规模的减少。
Cultivated meats were included for the first time in China's food security plan this year. It's said to generate up to 96% fewer emissions than regular meat, but cultured meat is not yet allowed for sale in China.
China is very stringent with the approval of the new food ingredients. They will evaluate the food safety, product necessity, the use in other countries, and etc. So at present, the cell-cultivated meat is still at very initial stage in China and even the global. So it still needs time to prove its safety, the stability, and the reliability.
But as China races to curb emissions and global warming, the heat is on for food tech startups to get past the hurdles to consumers' plates.
St. Waluyo is an old hand at farming. The 54-year-old comes from a family of farmers in central Java's Klaten Regency. But he started trying his hand at making his own organic fertilizer since last year. He mixes a concoction of indigenous microorganisms, including snails, and uses it on his paddy fields.
Bapak bisa melihat perbedaan antara sebelum dipakai pupuk yang kayak macam pakai menggunakan limbah dan daun-daun ini dan sebelumnya pas pakai pupuk yang kimia?
Oh, ada jelas. Dari produk mungkin ada sedikit waktu kami ke organik ada sedikit penurunan, cuma dirasa sama ketahanan nasi itu lebih lama. Kemarin dulu kami masih pakai konvensional murni, itu sehari semalam sudah lembek, sudah basi. Kami mencoba organik yang setelah ada plastik ini bisa 2 hari nasi itu masih bertahan gitu.
Waluyo is one of over 300 farmers belonging to the Klaten Sustainable Food Farmer Cooperative. It works with an international NGO, Ricolto, to carry out sustainable rice cultivation. Rice is an important part of Indonesia's culinary culture. The average Indonesian consumes about 114 kilograms of rice each year, according to Ricolto. And Indonesia is also among the top rice producers. But rice production across the world is estimated to emit greenhouse gases comparable to aviation, and switching away from unsustainable farming practices is a work in progress in Indonesia.
These farmers will work intensively to use chemicals to maintain that they are able to have the yield. Of course, it will increase the methane.
Ricolto is a member of the Sustainable Rice Platform, or SRP, a global alliance that seeks to transform the field by setting standards and best practices. These cover areas including pre-planting, water use, and nutrient and pest management, all advocated by Ricolto in its training of smallholder farmers. Farmers are also trained to implement intermittent irrigation. Flooded paddy fields, often the chosen means of irrigation, are a major contributor to climate change, estimated to generate about 10% of global methane emissions.
Kadang-kadang cukup basah ataupun ini pun masih bagus, masih jadi retak-retak sedikit nggak masalah. Kalau dulu pengennya ya direndam terus gitu, dan itu berdampak ke tanaman sendiri tidak bagus.
Droughts and extreme rainfall brought about by climate change are already shrinking yields and worsening grain quality. To improve harvests, one strategy being taught to farmers by Ricolto is the Jajar Lagoa planting system. This is a cropping pattern where farmers leave an empty space after every 2 to 4 rows of rice plants.
This plot uses the plant spacing system, while this one right next to it doesn't. You can see the one on my left is greener and has a higher yield than the one on my right.
Despite the higher yield, Muhammad Heri Tumbin, head of the Klaten Sustainable Food Farmer Cooperative, says getting farmers on board sustainable practices isn't easy.
Menurut Bapak, tantangan terbesar yang dihadapi oleh Bapak dan tim koperasi juga itu seperti apa?
Tantangan dari kami yang dari tim koperasi untuk mengembalikan kebiasaan petani yang sudah pemupukan dan pengolahan lahan yang terlalu over itu, kita mensosialisasikan tingkatan petani juga harus proses.
Indonesia has 2 key targets to increase food production and environmental sustainability. That's according to Budi Sulistyo, who is tasked by the Agriculture Ministry to work with farmers in Klaten Regency's Bayat district.
Tantangannya seperti apa, Pak?
He says authorities are also trying to up the annual harvest using a variety of rice crop that matures quickly.
Belum tersedianya secara cukup varietas genja, itu yang pertama. Yang kedua, petani sekarang memang masih terkendala di proses pengolahan tanah di mana jerami itu tidak segera cepat membusuk. Nah, ini alhamdulillah selain di Dinas Pertanian juga dari koperasi memang menggalakkan di penyuluhan-penyuluhannya di program-program SRP-nya milik Koperasi Tani ini memang salah satunya dengan penggalakan penggunaan dekomposer itu. Ini cukup membantu kami selaku dinas, ini kita bisa bersinergi bersama-sama.
Efforts are also being made in Boyolali Regency, about an hour and a half away by road from Klaten, to produce SRP standard rice. Its cooperatives guide members to produce high-quality or even organic rice sustainably, and have obtained certification to sell this rice at home and abroad.
Untuk SRP di sini itu baru akan menggunakan pestisida kimia itu kalau kondisinya memang sudah parah, tidak bisa dikendalikan dengan organik, itu baru bisa menggunakan pupuk kimia. Untuk petani organik di sini sudah full menggunakan organik.
Rice that's farmed sustainably can fetch more on the market, with a difference of up to 20 US cents per kilogram between conventionally harvested rice and SRP and organic. As climate change threatens to hurt harvests, this could sweeten the deal for Indonesia's farmers to make the switch.
It's summer in Mumbai and the heat and humidity are intense. But in just a couple of months, the monsoon rains will arrive, bringing relief to many. This community downtown fears the rainy season, though. The dozens of families and businesses here have been struggling with severe flooding over the past decade or so. It disrupts their lives, damages their homes, and impacts their livelihoods. Take Anju Tavari. On days when there's particularly heavy rain, her home gets completely flooded. This was in 2020. The family's food supplies and possessions were ruined. Anju feels a wave of helplessness washing over her as the rainy season draws closer.
फर्क क्या वैसा ही है, ज़्यादा होता है लेकिन कम नहीं होता है. पानी ज़्यादा भरता है लेकिन कम नहीं होता. अभी कम से कम कमर के बराबर आता है पानी, इतना ध्यान रखें. पानी भर जाता है तो हम लोग अपना लेके बर्तन से पानी बाहर निकालते हैं तो भी पानी घर में घुसा जाता है.
Shabam Jaiswal runs this eatery further down the road, and his business could be in deep water. He says he had no choice but to shut his store during particularly heavy flooding in the previous monsoon season.
24 घंटे के लिए पूरा दुकान वगैरह बंद था. रात से पानी भरना चालू हुआ, 2 दिन तक था. बोले तो सारा दिन, फिर पूरी रात, दूसरे दिन ख़त्म हुआ पानी. यही नुकसान तो होता ही है, रहेगा ही, इसमें क्या है.
The poor bear the brunt of the impact of flooding in the coastal city of Mumbai. Their homes are often poorly constructed, and it's a struggle to manage the costs associated with water damage. As more high-rise offices and luxury residential buildings sprout up, green areas that can absorb floodwaters are being destroyed. Drains also get clogged up with trash. It's a problem that its people, including the rich, cannot afford to turn a blind eye to. By 2050, India's financial capital will be largely submerged during high tide, according to projections by US-based Climate Central. Scientists say climate change is playing a major role, leading to rising sea levels and more extreme weather conditions, including heavier rainfall. This is already taking a huge toll, causing hundreds of deaths in Mumbai and the wider state of Maharashtra last year. And the economic impact is also devastating.
A report by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reveals Mumbai is among the world's most vulnerable cities to the financial effects of climate change. It estimates that rising sea levels and flood-related damage will amount to $50 billion by 2050.
But solutions to mitigate the effects of flooding are surfacing. And some could even deal with Mumbai's ironic challenge of occasional water shortages.
Let us understand what is rainwater harvesting. It is a process where we collect the rainwater either in a drum or in a bucket or in a big water collection chamber, or the biggest reservoir, natural reservoir, is the groundwater.
Subhajit Mukherjee is on a mission to install hundreds of rainwater harvesting pits in parks across Mumbai.
So now the biggest challenge of Mumbai is concrete. Water is flowing, and these are the type of stormwater drains that we have. So every water is going into the stormwater drain. It's important that we hold it before it enters the stormwater drain. Whatever pots you have.
Such rainwater pits absorb and conserve water that might otherwise contribute to flooding. Through these pits, the water percolates through the earth, becoming groundwater, or they can be connected to wells. They typically cost less than $50 each to build and are funded by Mumbai's authorities and other groups. Mumbai last year launched its new Climate Action Plan, for which it has earmarked $40 million a year. As part of this, it has constructed some floodwater tanks, including one a couple of kilometres away from Anju and Shabam's neighbourhood. They each collect millions of litres of water to be released into the sea during low tide. The plan also includes a drive towards electric vehicles to reduce the city's own contribution to global warming. India has pledged to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2070.
For communities living near the coast especially, the world's ability to meet emissions targets will be crucial to stemming the tide. This area has some of the city's most expensive homes, but where I'm standing could be underwater in less than a couple of decades due to rising sea levels.
When the tide is in, the tide is barely about 10 meters away from where they are. So they are one amongst several such communities which are most certainly at the maximum risk.
Environmentalist Abhishek Talwar says climate change needs to be taken much more seriously by everyone if Mumbai is to be saved from going underwater. He says wetlands should be developed to absorb floodwater, and individuals can reduce their carbon footprint by taking steps such as using less air conditioning.
The only way we're going to meet those targets is every single one of us contributes what we can to ensure we get there. And I think this government is very, very serious about meeting these targets, so we will get there.
Residents in Anju and Shabam's community say that the civic body has installed new pipelines to help drain away rainwater. And they hope that might make a difference this monsoon season, having suffered so much in previous years.
मगर अभी भी ये बीएमसी ने थोड़ा बहुत काम किया है, देखेगा ना, अपन ट्राई करेगा। उनकी उन्होंने अपने को सुरक्षा दिया है, वो सुरक्षा बारिश गिरेगा उसके ऊपर है सर। अभी मैं आपको बोल नहीं सकता, आ जाओ मेरे घर में देखो करके।
Indeed, some things are out of the city's immediate control. As Mumbai is lashed with heavier rainfall due to climate change, the problem runs much deeper.